Challenge. Hey, challenge it.
Game, you don't want to go versus against
Yes,
Eminem.
I do. What do you mean? Yeah, I do. The fuck you mean? So what you trying to say? Hey, let's just say what you're trying to say. You trying to say that I don't want to head of fate with the white man?
10 full minutes of razor-sharp bars aimed straight at Eminem. No sugarcoating, no pulling punches. This wasn't some random diss floating around the internet. It felt staged, deliberate, and heavyweight, like a title fight announced in advance. The Game didn't step into the booth just to rhyme. He stepped in like he was checking the stability of a legend's seat, and you could feel the shockwave ripple through the culture. Let's be real, Game has always carried that king energy dating back to the G-Unit era. He never bit his tongue, always calling out who's authentic, who's acting, and who the industry props up while pushing others aside. For years, he's been vocal about feeling overlooked, even after dropping classics like The Documentary and Doctor's Advocate. So when the Black Slim Shady dropped in August 2022, it didn't land like a casual jab. It hit like pressure that had been building for years, finally cracking open. Game had watched other legends get crowned while his own name slowly drifted out of the spotlight.
Well, me personally, nah, is Eminem better than me? Nah, he not, bro.
Like, Eminem is not a better rapper than me. Like, just rap. I'm better today. And if I'm not, get up and let's rap. Let's rap. That's all I want to do.
And he clearly wasn't interested in staying quiet anymore. Instead of subtweets or sneak disses, he went straight at Eminem. No dancing around it, no coded language. And what made it even crazier wasn't just the bars, it was how calculated the whole thing felt. From the production to the structure to the attitude, this wasn't rushed. Game pulled up fully loaded. Voices, skits, impressions, flow switches, even moments where he mirrored Eminem's style just to flip it back on him. He tapped into their shared history with Dr. Dre, joked about Eminem's troubled genius persona, and reshaped Eminem into a character inside his story, instead of the untouchable icon the world usually treats like royalty. That kind of move is bold in any era of hip-hop, but in today's climate, it felt like a direct challenge. And then, silence. Eminem didn't respond, at all. That quiet hit harder than any bass drop. Some people said it proved Game didn't land a clean enough punch. Others argued Eminem was staying above it, refusing to step down from the mountain to trade verses.
You do all that shit, Eminem. And I used to think Eminem was better than me.
So what you saying right now?
He's not.
Either way, that silence sent shockwaves. Twitter went wild. YouTube lit up with reactions, theories, and frame-by-frame breakdowns. Everyone wanted answers. Was Eminem secretly cooking up a response? Was this about to turn into another kill shot moment like the MGK situation? Or was Eminem brushing Game off completely? The debates got heated fast. But to understand why Game even pressed that button, you have to rewind a bit, because the tension didn't start with the song. Earlier in 2022, during a Drink Champs interview, Game dropped a line that split the internet in half. Eminem is not better than me. No hesitation, no backtracking. Hardcore Eminem fans called it delusional. Others said Game had every right to speak his truth. From his perspective, it made sense. He wasn't denying Eminem's technical skill. He was talking about the full package: lived experience, street weight, versatility, catalog, authenticity beyond just complex rhyme schemes. Once those words were out, something heavy started building. So when Game announced his album, Drillmatic, Heart vs. Mind, fans expected a few jabs, not a 10-minute centerpiece aimed directly at Eminem like a spotlight. The Black Slim Shady wasn't casual. It was an open challenge. Game didn't hide that either. In interviews leading up to the release, he made it clear he wanted Eminem to respond. He wasn't subtle about it. He expected a reply because Eminem has a history of responding when someone steps into his lane. Game even said it outright. If Eminem doesn't respond, that alone means he wins the moment. The track went personal, touching on Eminem's legacy, his struggles, his family, and the image he's carried for years. Some listeners felt Game pushed too far. Others said that's exactly what battle rap is supposed to be. But beneath all the shock value, one question kept floating around. Was Game making a genuine artistic statement? Or was this a calculated move to pull the spotlight back onto himself? Let's be honest, his name still carries weight, but his recent albums haven't shaken the culture like his early classics. So, taking a direct shot at Eminem, one of the biggest figures in hip-hop history, looked like a serious chess move. To some, it was smart strategy. To others, a reach wrapped in bars. Either way, it worked. Reaction channels exploded. Hip-hop pages posted non-stop. Comment sections turned into war zones. Whether people thought the track was razor-sharp or way too long, everyone was talking about the game again. And he knew exactly what that meant. Attention is still currency. And Eminem's silence instantly became the center of the story. The culture kept circling the same question. Why didn't he respond? Some said game wasn't worth the pen time. Others said silence was the response. And that's where this story really starts getting interesting. Some people argued that the Black Slim Shady didn't land hard enough to force a response. But another theory started gaining real traction, one that actually made a lot of sense. A lot of fans believe Eminem learned from the MGK situation. When Eminem fired back at Rap Devil with Kill Shot, he didn't just win the battle, he accidentally gave MGK the biggest boost of his entire career. His name exploded overnight. So maybe this time silence was the smarter chess move. But here's the twist. Eminem's silence didn't end the moment, it extended it. Instead of killing the conversation, it stretched it out and turned it into a mystery. Fans started dissecting the quiet like it was a coded message. Was it respect, hesitation, strategic indifference, or was Eminem simply refusing to validate the challenge? Every theory added fuel to the fire. Meanwhile, the game used the spotlight exactly the way a veteran would. He leaned into it. Interviews, visuals, album promotion, reminding people of who he stood across from before. 50 Cent, indirect shots at Jay-Z, and entire camps like G-Unit. From his perspective, Eminem wasn't untouchable, just another throne to challenge. And that's why the moment hit so hard. Whether you thought the Black Slim Shady was brilliant or felt like it dragged on too long, it forced hip-hop to pay attention. Game flipped Eminem's silence into a full-blown spectacle, one that couldn't be ignored. Eminem's fan base, one of the most loyal and aggressive in music, reacted instantly. Comment sections flooded. YouTube became a war zone of reactions and breakdowns, like-dislike battles, frame-by-frame lyric analysis. Defending Eminem felt like a mission. They argued the track was too long, that the disrespect felt manufactured, that game was chasing attention. But on the other side, a lot of listeners pushed back. They said Game reminded the culture of something important. No rapper is too legendary to be challenged. That hip-hop's competitive spirit shouldn't disappear just because someone reaches icon status. Some even called the track a throwback, a long-form diss with structure, skits, character work, and storytelling. Not reckless shots, calculated pressure, a deliberate tap on a sleeping giant. Media outlets ran with it. Podcasts debated it non-stop. Headlines popped up everywhere. Did Game push it too far? Should Eminem stay quiet? Was this Game's last big swing or his smartest move? No matter where you landed, the audacity had everyone's attention. And that alone was power. This moment went way beyond who had the sharper bars. It became about boldness, about having the nerve to challenge a throne most rappers wouldn't even look at. By doing that, Game placed himself dead center in the conversation. Eminem's silence became one of the most intriguing parts of the entire saga. A piece of hip-hop theater fans kept analyzing like it hid something deeper. And Game kept pushing forward with confidence, repeating one thing over and over. If Eminem doesn't respond, the silence is the response. Some people said he was reaching. Others said he created a moment that would be talked about for years. But one thing was undeniable. The Black Slim Shady shook the culture. It turned one song into weeks of debate and proved something important. In hip-hop, the boldest move isn't always the knockout punch. Sometimes it's just having the guts to step into the arena. Even though Eminem never dropped a direct response, fans swear they caught subtle hints later. When Curtain Call 2 dropped and Eminem released a remix of Crack a Bottle, listeners pointed to a few lines they felt might have been aimed at Game. Not clear disses, just flashes. And knowing Eminem's layered writing style, nothing ever feels accidental. Still, no full diss track came. That silence kept the culture buzzing. Was it intentional? Coincidence? A warning shot? Nobody could agree. What did change was Game's position. Before the diss, he wasn't dominating the conversation the way he wanted. After that 10-minute challenge, everything flipped. Streams climbed. Old interviews resurfaced. His name was everywhere again. Reaction channels that hadn't mentioned him in years came back, breaking down bars like detectives. Every punchline got replayed, rewound, analyzed. Even people who weren't fans stayed locked in. That kind of attention has real value, but the move didn't come without backlash. Some radio voices and bloggers said certain lines, especially references to Eminem's daughter, crossed a line. Others argued Game looked like he was trying to shake someone else's throne instead of highlighting his own legacy. And then there was the Dre factor. Dr. Dre is the thread connecting both Eminem and Game, the man who helped launch both careers. By going at Eminem, Game was indirectly touching Dre's legacy, and that made a lot of longtime fans uncomfortable. And that's where this story gets even more complicated. A lot of people felt the Game was stirring a pot that didn't need to be stirred, and not long after, the quiet backlash started creeping in. Not loud cancellations, not public callouts, just subtle shifts, whispers, small comments, behind-the-scenes changes. Some playlists allegedly started skipping Drillmatic. Certain platforms didn't seem eager to push it. Interviews slowed down. A few opportunities reportedly faded out. Nothing was officially confirmed. But the timing made plenty of people raise an eyebrow. Because in this industry, silence doesn't always mean peace. Sometimes silence means the room just got colder. When you go at someone with Eminem's reach and influence, the effects don't always show up immediately. Sometimes they surface quietly, over time, in ways you don't see until you look back. But even with all that energy floating around, Game never flinched. In every interview, every appearance, he stood by his words with a confident grin, like he already knew the reaction he was going to spark. He admitted he understood the move he was making and enjoyed watching it unfold. To him, this wasn't just conflict, it was strategy. And for a while, that strategy worked. Drillmatic didn't skyrocket to #1, but thanks to the Black Slim Shady, the album got far more attention than it likely would have on its own. The disc gave the project a storyline, something people could follow. Even listeners who didn't love the album still pressed play just to see what the noise was about. But the risk was huge. This wasn't a new artist chasing a viral moment. This was a veteran with a real legacy. If the move fell flat, it could have looked like desperation. If Eminem completely ignored him, it could have made Game seem irrelevant. That's why the debates burned so hot. People couldn't agree on whether Game made a genius strategic play or walked himself into long-term damage. And that split, that tension, is exactly what kept the conversation alive far longer than most diss tracks ever last. Fast forward to now, and the Black Slim Shady still hasn't disappeared from hip-hop discussions. It may not trend every day, but it lives on in comment sections, podcasts, and debates about what modern rap beef really looks like. It wasn't just a moment, it became a marker. Looking back from 2025, people still argue about the ripple effects. On one hand, Game made a bold, calculated move that reminded the culture he's sharp, strategic, and unafraid to challenge giants. He didn't drop a couple of slick bars. He built a full theatrical diss aimed at one of the most respected rappers alive. That's not clout chasing, that's legacy talk. But big moves come with costs. The Black Slim Shady ended up overshadowing everything else on Drillmatic. The album itself was solid. Some fans even called it his best work in years. But casual listeners locked onto that one track. The rest of the project stood in the shadow of a diss that never got an official response. And that imbalance shaped how people remember that era. It didn't ruin Game's career, not even close. His core fans stayed loyal and respected the courage it took to step into that arena. But mainstream media flattened the moment into Game versus Eminem, replaying rivalry instead of focusing on his growth or the depth of the album. Some critics even argued it made him look stuck, like he was still trying to prove something. Yet, through all of it, Game never backed down. Late 2022 through 2023, he stood firm in every interview. He didn't soften his stance, didn't walk anything back, didn't change his tone. And that consistency kept the story alive. Eminem's approach was the complete opposite. No diss track, no clear sneak shots, no public reaction. He stayed focused on his own work. Anniversary releases, surprise features, live shows, while the Game conversation lingered in the background like a shadow he never acknowledged. That silence became its own debate. Was it a masterclass in starving an opponent of attention, or a missed chance to go bar for bar with a real challenger? Meanwhile, Game made sure the moment never fully disappeared. Every so often, he'd slide in a light reference during an interview or post. Not enough to restart the clash, just enough to keep the spark alive. Not obsession, awareness. So, what's the verdict in 2025? Honestly, it's complicated. Game didn't lose. He stayed visible, stayed consistent, kept touring, kept releasing music, and never folded under pressure. Taking a swing at a giant and surviving it stamped him as one of the few artists bold enough to try. But it wasn't a clean win either. He never got the response he wanted. Never turned the diss into a full mainstream resurgence. And Eminem's fan base never eased up. Some doors may have quietly closed behind the scenes, especially with Dr. Dre sitting in the background like a silent referee. In the end, the Black Slim Shady became something bigger than a diss track. It became a cultural checkpoint, a reminder that hip-hop is built on competition, confidence, and the courage to challenge legends. Game tapped the throne and stood tall through the smoke. Was it reckless? Yes. Was it genius? Also yes. And that's exactly why, years later, the conversation still hasn't died. Underscore 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 underscore. If you're rocking with deep dives like this, make sure you hit the like button, subscribe, and share this with someone who lives for real rap
either a masterclass in starving an opponent of attention or a missed chance to go bar for bar with what beef really looks like.